This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing stated on it, either by its hosts or any guests, is to be construed as psychological, medical, or legal advice. You are listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. I'm Haley Radke. We have two incredible adoptee activists with us today. Maria Diemar and Lisa Sjöblom, both adopted to Sweden, joined up to elevate adoptee causes in some very impactful ways. Maria is the subject of Lisa's latest graphic novel, The Excavated Earth, which exposes a horrific story of how thousands of Chilean babies were literally kidnapped and stolen to be sold for adoption to Sweden and many other countries. You won't believe some of the shocking details that Maria and Lisa share with us today. Lisa also shares a few thoughts with us on the recent findings of the South Korean Truth and Reconciliation Commission. These ladies are amazing. I can't wait for you to hear this conversation. We wrap up with some recommended resources, and as always, links to everything we'll be talking about today are on the website, adopteeson.com. Let's listen in. I'm so pleased to welcome two guests to Adoptees On. First, Lisa Sjöblom. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Hi, so nice to be here again.
It's so good to see you, Lisa. And for the first time, so excited, Maria Diemar. Welcome, Maria.
Hi, thank you.
I'm so excited to talk to you, ladies. We're going to start a little differently. I know I always ask about what your story is. How did you guys connect? You were both adopted to Sweden from different countries, but how did this friendship bloom for you?
Yeah, resources online about other cases. And I found Lisa's book, Palimpsest. And I read it, and then I emailed Lisa, and we started from there. Yeah.
Palimpsest, as an aside, such a gorgeous book. If you haven't read it, I mean, you're missing out. So you emailed Lisa, and Lisa, did you know about the stolen Chilean children?
Yes, yeah, because I, of course, as an activist, I follow the news closely about everything going on in the adoption world. And I had heard about stolen children within Chile before the big news broke about the international scandals. So I was following the news. And then when the news broke in Sweden was early 2018, I actually organized the first adoptee-led demonstration in solidarity with the Chilean adoptees to make the government act on the news, basically. Yeah, so I was very upset in my corner. But yeah, I didn't know Maria Diemar at the time. But then you, Maria, formed an organization for Chilean adoptees, and then we connected. So I was really happy to be asked to be involved and see what I could do to help you.
Maria, if you're comfortable, would you mind sharing a little bit of your story? Because you didn't always know that you were stolen from your country of origin.
No, exactly. So I was born in 1975 in southern part of Chile. And I always knew that I was 10 weeks when I came to Sweden. And back then, it was it was a dictatorship in Chile. And the future adoptive parents were asked not to travel to Chile to get the kids. They were told to stay in Sweden, and that we, the kids, were going to arrive to Sweden, and they could pick us up at the airport. And it sounds so terrible when I say it. But yeah, that's like 1975. Yeah, so I came to my adoptive parents in Stockholm, in Sweden, where I grew up, and with the story that my mom was poor and that she couldn't take care of a child. And I think they were always very open about the adoption, and it was very obvious that I was adopted, like Lisa and other people from other countries. It's very obvious that we are not like Swedish people back then. So they always talked about like my background, what they knew. And when I was 10, I think it wasn't until I was 10, I realized or I understood like the documents that said that I had an older brother in Chile. So that's why when I started to think about, like, I have to go back because my mom is there and my older brother is there, so I have to go there. So my life, I started to focus on, I have to learn Spanish, I have to study about Chile, what is Chile. And it was like a very big thing for me to understand that as a 10 or 11-year-old. And I always knew, like, I wanted to look for them, but I didn't know how. So it wasn't until I finished high school when I was 19, I started my search. And back then, you had, as an adoptive person, you had to contact the adoption agency that brought you to Sweden. And I can mention that in Sweden, there was like one big, like, it's the second largest adoption agency in the world. They handle 30,000 cases of children from abroad. And we had to contact them and pay them money to get information that they had received about us. So still today, they have my birth certificate, for example. I don't have it. I have a copy, but we have to ask them for that information. So I did, and I paid a little money, and I had to wait and wait. And after 1 year, they told me that they couldn't help me. They told me that I had to go to Chile on my own and to search for my story over there. So of course I couldn't go directly because it's a long trip, a long journey, and it costs a lot of money. So I studied and I worked extra, different jobs, and I traveled to Chile, and I stayed there for almost 3 months because I wanted to, like, learn the language better and to get to know my country. And I decided also, okay, I will go to southern Chile and look for my mom and brother. But the thing was, in Chile, I had all the information. Like, I had to go to the courthouse where where it was decided that I was going to have Swedish foster parents, because I realized that I wasn't adopted in Chile. I was a foster child that left Chile to Sweden, and I was adopted in Sweden when I was 6 months old. And I went to the court to get information about my background. I thought that they were going to receive me with open arms and give me the address to my mom. But they hold my information, like the secretary that I was meeting up with, she held my file and said that she couldn't show it to me because I was adopted. And I had to, and then from there, I started to go to the orphanage where they told me, the adoption agency told me that I had been at this orphanage. I went there. They told me I was born at a certain hospital, so I went there. And everywhere I went, like, the door closed. I was kind of welcome. They talked to me, but they said, like, there's no registers, there is no information, there is nothing. So when I returned to Sweden after 3 months in Chile, I felt like I don't exist in Chile. It was so strange, but I was even more determined that I have to find my story. I have to find out, where is my mom and where is my brother? But it took me 7 years. And after 7 years, I, by coincidence, got in contact with, back then she was studying her last year to become a journalist, a woman called Ana Maria Olivares. And I mention her name because she became a friend. But back then in 2003, she helped me to locate my mom, and it took her like 1 week, not even 1 week, 5 days to find my mom. And then her uncle that lives in the same area went to visit my mom and to tell about, your daughter is looking for you. So that was in 2003, and I received like a very long email from the man that went to my mom's house and talked to her. And he said like that he had met my mom. He also sent me a picture, but that she told him that she never gave me up for adoption, that I was taken from her. And back then I had never heard about like stolen children or children that have been like forcefully taken for their mothers in Chile. So I didn't know what to think. And I was thinking about it, and I contacted the adoption agency and I asked them, like, why is my mom telling me that I was taken from her? And they told me, but don't think about that. That is common. Like the mothers, they do that. They don't want to feel guilty for having, leaving their babies up for adoption. So no, it's nothing. And I had this feeling I didn't know that woman. I didn't know my mom, but still, this is what she told me through this man. But I thought, with time, I will, learn the truth. But it took me 14 years before I could, with help of like a third person that finally could tell me about like the context, like what happened in Chile. This was not, just one child or two children that were abducted. It's thousands. So in 2017, I could finally understand it. But from 2003 up to 2017, I had been to Chile several times. I had met siblings. I had spent time in Chile. But still, I couldn't process this information because that wasn't what I have been, told.
So you have the idea in your mind, right? That you're like, well, she's saying you were taken, but like,
yeah,
not really. That's just what she's saying to, I don't know, psychologically deal with losing you or something.
Yeah, but the thing is, like growing up in Sweden, you believe so much in the system. You believe so much in like paperwork. Like papers, they are the truth. And in the paper, it said that she gave me up for adoption.
But it's also that's the story we are told, not just from my parents, but from everywhere in Sweden. The narrative that we have been rescued and that our mothers gave us up is so prominent and so strong. And Adoptionscentrum that Maria mentions, that adoption agency, they have so much power, and they kind of own the story of adoption. So, you're up against so much. And because the thing that Maria tells about understanding what happened to her or being told what happened to her, it sounds very similar to what I went through when I discovered the truth about my adoption. And I started asking around, and people just said that I was crazy. That I was like, maybe you're an exception. And you write to the authorities and to the agencies, and they tell you, no. This is, it's just what the mothers are saying because they feel guilty. And they even said that on national television. And they keep saying it today, even after everything that's been discovered. So of course you think you won case or that you're crazy. So that's the thing now when all these investigations are opening up, and like with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Korea and lots of other commissions. And like for me, I discovered that I was a paper orphan, and I had to Google it, and I ended up with no answers. No one knew about this. And now when you look at the term paper orphan, everybody knows about it. It's become an established term.
And just so people know what that means.
Oh yeah, sorry. It's like in my case, I have known living parents, but I also have an official document that says that I have an unknown background and I'm an orphan in the true sense of the word. I have no parents, no living parents. I'm an orphan. But that's just a complete lie, a falsification, which was needed to make me adoptable.
Sure. So it's like full societal gaslighting of all adopted people. And both of you have completely falsified paperwork to do with your adoptions.
Yeah.
And you're not the exception.
That we grow up believing, and our parents grew up believing it, and the whole society supported that idea.
And I think also like because as an adopted person, you understand like when you finally like find your family and you start a relationship, it's a lot of things going on. And like to getting to know like siblings, and it's a lot to deal with, and it's easier to deal with the happy feelings like, oh, I'm getting to know people, like I'm related to, by blood and all of that, it was easier to focus on that than to focus on like the hard stuff. So like Lisa said, also with the papers, I never said that, but in my case, when I started to look through and when the journalist in Chile explained this to me, that, but look at your birth certificate, you have a Swedish name. So in Chile, I'm registered as Ingegerd Maria Olsson Karlsson. And the same as Lisa, I don't have parents. I was, I just existed one day, or the 18th of August, I suddenly existed in Chile with a Swedish name. And in Chile, now I know, but I didn't know back then in 2003, but I have always existed in Chile, like I never left the country. So I have like here you have the social security number or ID. So I have a Chilean ID. I can vote. I'm a citizen. I can just go to the consulate where I live and ask them to renew my passport or my ID, like my identification card. So it's like I never left. Now I can see that, but no one could explain that to me back then. So we have more facts today, and it's easier. There's this page in Chile where you can search. If you look at your birth certificate and the name you have on that paper, if you search for that on this page, you will have the information of like an address, and you will have your number, and it's insane. But we didn't know that until today or 7 years ago. So it's more accessible. Like you have more information accessible today through, internet and also by people actually knowing about this. But back then, more than 20 years ago, it was very different. So, yeah.
Okay, I hope this isn't too in the weeds, but are you saying there was like two, I'm just going to use Marias, but two Maria documented? Like there was the Maria that stayed and is a citizen, and then there's the falsified Swedish named Maria who left.
No.
Like, is that what they did? Or it was always just you appeared as Swedish Maria, and there was no record of you leaving.
Exactly. So for me, for like one group of people, we were registered with Swedish names. And I can also mention that in the court in Temuco, where I was given Swedish foster parents, in that court, they had, I don't know how many applications from Swedish parents that were looking for children. So what they did, that they took, a couple from, papers from the court, and they found children, and they registered the children with the names that the Swedish parents wished their future child to be called. So I was registered with my Swedish name before the foster parents in Sweden knew I existed. So I have read like my Swedish mom, her notes about me, and she learned about my existence 1 week after I was registered with her and her husband's names. So that happens to some, and some have 2 or 3 identities in Chile, because I was stolen from my mom at birth. So she never saw me, she never held me at the hospital. I was carried away by a social assistant. But normally, like a mom in Chile give birth to the child, and she gets this note from the doctor or from the midwife that on this day, this woman gave birth to this child. And after a few weeks, the mother can walk with the child to the, to the registers to register the child. And then you make this birth certificate. But in my case, and for many others that were stolen, it was made this document with help of witnesses. So 2 men, they signed a paper that I was this baby with a Swedish name, and they signed that paper, and then I suddenly existed in Chile, like someone without parents. But now when I know about all this, I can see in the documents from the court that my mom is mentioned, her name is there, but so she could decide to give me away, and so I could be sent to Sweden. So there they mention her name, but in my birth certificate she doesn't exist. So it's very convenient that she can exist in some documents and in others not. So in Chile, they only decided that the court in Chile only decided that I can leave the country and that I can travel to foster parents in Sweden. So I was never adopted in Chile. It happened in Sweden. And they didn't like send the papers back or something. So we never left the country. So it's I think they talk about 20,000 children and even more, but that they know of have left the country, but they don't know where all children are.
It's so similar to Korea.
That is like any normal person listening to that has got to be like, that is bananas. Like, that is, my gosh. I mean, you guys could see my face. I'm just getting madder and madder and madder.
Yeah.
Wow. Kate.
But that's the thing when you start actually listing it like that, because you're so used to talking about certain aspects of adoption, but when you actually start listing what really happened, it's absolutely insane, and it's so obviously criminal.
Yes.
Because the Swedish adoption agency is still trying to pretend that it was all on Chile, that they can admit that maybe the system wasn't great, but they had nothing to do with it. But the fact that Maria had a Swedish name in a birth certificate when she left, before she even had been assigned parents and adopted by them, I mean, it's a crazy gamble to begin with, but it's proof that Swedish people were there on location making these decisions, because she couldn't have gotten a Swedish name by a Chilean person. I mean, it's a very specific Swedish name too, I could say. It's quite traditional, so it's not just something you would pick up from a book, make up, like, oh, this sounds Swedish. It's a proper Swedish name. So it's proof that they were there. They were acting knowingly. And they still try to pretend like, oh, no, this was all Chilean, the Chilean responsibility, Crazy.
Yeah, colluding, big time. Lisa, can we just talk a little bit about, like, most of our listeners probably are quite familiar with Korean adoptees because there's so many of you.
Yeah.
So can you just do a little history on Korean adoption, like the reasons and like some of this nonsense, of course, was happening there too, just because I want Maria to contrast that with what was happening in Chile at the time. Like, I'm talking about macro level reasons why Korea was exporting all their babies.
Well, I do a super brief summary because, we can talk for a long time. But Korea had been through a devastating war between 50 and 53. So it left a lot of actual real orphans. And there were a lot of foreign aid workers and a lot of presence of foreign soldiers, mainly US soldiers, who were there, and they could see the plight of the children, basically. And that's when people who were worried about these kids, what was going to happen to them, and some had been, were the result of relationships between US soldiers and Korean women. So I think it was we can say that it started with the US, that there was an evangelical couple there called Harry and Berta Holt, who started bringing real orphans over to the US and basically marketing them. Like, look, we're taking care of these poor children from Korea who are left orphaned, and you could also do the same thing. So it's basically a campaign for parents or people who want to adopt a child to get their own Korean. And then it became so popular that that's how the industry started. But the real orphans ran out quite quickly. It's just like in Chile that they started, the demand was so high, so they had to find another way to produce orphans. And that's when coercion started, and actual theft and kidnapping and the falsified paperwork. But on the Korean side, this was also an opportunity for them to rebuild the country. I don't know if you've heard this description of Korea, but it's called the economical wonder, because they rebuilt the country so quickly and became one of the richest countries in the world quite quickly. quite drastically. So you can compare to other countries that were on the same level of poverty after the Korean War, and then how quickly they rose from that compared to other countries. So we're in a similar situation. And my body is part of that they built their wealth on my body and possibly up to 250,000 other people. But the numbers vary. Just like in Chile, a lot of the adoptions, were registered and they were dodgy and under the table. So the official figure is lower. It's lower than 200,000, but usually 200,000 people as the number that it's shared. So through this, they got a lot of American dollars coming into the country, but they also saved lots and lots of money on social welfare. So they didn't need to build up a social welfare system for themselves because they could just send us off. And just like in Chile, it was also, and after all the the insanity that was going on then, it was a military dictatorship for many, many years that ended in 1987. So it was a military rule quite a long time in Korea. So, I mean, the human rights abuse were prominent just like in Chile. And this is one thing that Maria and I keep coming back to when we talk about all this, is that how can the adoption agencies convince themselves that adoptions in these insanely corrupt countries that are ruled by the military and are constantly committing crimes against humanity, against their own population, and particularly against poor people, how can they think that adoption can exist in like this ethical little bubble in these countries and convince them? I don't think that they actually truly believe that, but they manage to convince other people that's how it works. That we know that these children, that everything, that the whole system is perfectly ethical and in line with laws and regulations. Everything else is messed up. Like I usually take this example, like with Chile, that Sweden were boycotting Chilean goods. And also lots of refugees from Chile came into Sweden that we knew that they had been tortured. But babies, perfectly fine. Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, you're saving the babies. You're saving all those poor babies.
Yeah, but that poor women were able to give consent. And I think that it's in your papers, Maria. It actually says that your mother wanted you to go to Sweden.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Well, they cooked up a great story. Well, the other thing, like there were government workers in Korea, right? Patrolling, like looking for babies. like they had jobs to do just that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's been revealed now, of course, well, many years ago, but now it's become widespread knowledge, is of course that everyone was in on it, like midwives, doctors, orphanages, adoption agencies, civil servants, the police, and government officials. I mean, there was child finders, like you just said, finding children.
Right. And everybody was getting tips along the way. Like everybody was getting paid for something. So I know you two connected and you could commiserate on all of these similarities. Maria, can you tell us about the state of Chile in this time where all these children were taken and what sort of led to that?
No, but so this happened before the dictatorship. This happened earlier and it happened after. So in Chile, you had the dictatorship between 1973 and 1990. You know, I think they had the first democratic elected president. But so Chilean were stolen after also, up to 2000 something. But like the peak was during the year of the dictatorship. And like you said, one thing that is in Chile, they actually did an investigation in the parliament. So they decided to have a group of politicians to investigate what had happened to all the children and why. And they concluded like it was because there was this big demand from abroad, money coming into Chile. And when it's about Sweden, we know because it's documented in Sweden that the adoption agency, they actually paid Chilean social workers like monthly salary to, I don't know, to do what? So they were paid from Sweden. And if you are a social assistant in Chile, why are you supposed to get money from Sweden? But they are very open about it because I don't know, but they paid at least three social assistants. And in Sweden, we are officially, through this agency, we are 2,100 people, around that number. And then you have maybe 200, 300 other people. But, they worked hard to get so many children to a small country as Sweden. And also because the police in Chile, they have been investigating adoption, like cases where children like me, where we have left the country, and they have investigated cases, many cases, and they use my case like a kind of a pilot study quite early on. They started in 2018. The crime investigation regarding children that have left Chile started in February 2018, and it's still going on. And they concluded, I think, two years ago, that I was kidnapped. I am a victim of a crime, and who did it? Like, who is responsible? They also concluded that. But the judge that they said was mostly like responsible for me ending up in Sweden, she died in 2022. So there is no one to punish. So it's a little bit frustrating. But they had two situations where they talked to her, like this judge. And I have all the documentation in my file. It's 440 pages, the police investigation. And there she say that, Sweden, they had monopoly on children until 1982. So the children from her court in southern Chile, all the children came only to Sweden. But she decided to open up to other countries in 1982. But that is, it is so insane when you read about it today. And still, people say that, no, maybe this didn't happen. And we have all of those, proof, but still, like Lisa said earlier, that in Sweden, when they talk about what happened in Chile and that Sweden was very involved, and they say, but we don't know, maybe this didn't happen. So we are like caught between two countries, but still I don't know, something needs to happen, but it's hard because it's two legal systems. But still, if you know that this happened to so many, and that's one thing that we have been talking about, Lisa, that the amount of cases, the amount of mothers that are still looking for their, dead, because many children were declared dead, so they could leave the country. But they are looking for the children still today. And not only the judge that was responsible for, stolen children in southern Chile, the mothers, they're also dying. And so it's so important that not only to speed up the investigation, to make people aware of it, but it is so hard to fight the system. It's so hard. And we can talk about it, and we want to talk about it. But still, how can we speed this up?
So you said there's around 20,000 worldwide, right? Adopted out? Ish, not quite sure on the number.
So the thing is, and this happened so long ago, the police investigation in Chile, that is the number they use. So until they update it, it's the number I would use. Okay. But it could be more.
And so around 10% of those went to Sweden, or a little higher. And so I know they went to other countries as well. Mm-hmm. Do you know of any other countries that had also their names on birth certificates, or like lists of waiting parents?
So Switzerland, I know, because they are mentioned in my documentation from the judge. But Italy, you have Italy, France, Germany, Holland, Norway, Denmark, Australia, US, Mexico. You have so many. I think they're talking about more than 20 countries where we ended up. But some people, so what happened with children that were stolen and adopted within Chile is that they were like the adoptive parents, they came to the hospital and they registered a stolen child as their own. And that is what happened with children that left the country. So it's hard, they can't say a number. And also, like we know, the thing is with Sweden, because we love documents. So in Sweden, we at least have some false documents, but we can see patterns in the documentation, like the same hospitals or the same doctors or the same social assistants. So it has been easy to follow what happened to us. And also, like, because the adoption agency, they have all, over 2,000 people's records at their, archives in Sweden, in Stockholm. But I know it's harder with other countries like the US. They don't know how many because it was private adoption, churches, and not everyone even knows about that they were adopted, because, yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's maybe not as obvious as when you ended up in Sweden. So it's a mess. It's a mess.
One last comment on that, and I want to talk about your story is so compelling. Obviously, Lisa wrote about it, so we're going to get to that right away. Just the last comment on, so these were, for majority, I'm assuming, children of impoverished mothers. I think your mom couldn't read and write. Is that correct? I listened to that in another interview. So they were intentionally stealing from areas of poverty because those people couldn't fight back. They're trying to eradicate poverty in some way by taking away children. Can you say more about that?
No, but it's what they have concluded. We have like an historian, for example, in southern Chile, Karen Alfaro. She's been investigating this for years, and what she has seen is like the target, population for single mothers of an indigenous background. And so, yeah, I think in my mom is exactly, what she has concluded. And that is, it is, I don't know, it's just so terrible. And you kind of have, for us growing up in Sweden, because of history, people don't like to talk about race, like ethnicity or race. But many of us that ended up in Sweden, we have the same background as me, like partly or full like indigenous background. And in Chile, the children that were adopted, they hadn't the same background. So they were whiter than the children that stayed in Chile. So it is, that is something that I'm laughing, but it's terrible. But that is what happened. So they could export indigenous children. It was easier to like get people abroad to accept that, even though my parents and all the parents that adopted children through adoption, the adoption agency, Adoptionscentrum, they filled out this chart, like how brown could their future baby be, what age, what, So they filled out that, and I am a little darker than the wish my adoptive parents had, but yeah. So, but that is something because, I really would like to mention this, that like for the Swedish cases, because we were very early on comparing to other countries. So the first child that were like exported from Chile, it was in 1971. So it was very like early before the coup. But then they have statistics that said that in 1974, 16 children left Chile to be adopted in Sweden. The year I was born, in 1975, we were 97 children that left Chile to be adopted in Sweden. The year after, in 1976, it was almost 200 children. So it's, so they had this kind of worked out this process and speeding and more children, and it's insane. But what I wanted to say in my case was there was so little information. We had my mom's name and that she was poor and couldn't read or write, and she wanted me to be adopted in Sweden somehow. But there was no information about my background, that I'm indigenous. So that is something I understood 8 years ago. Because we have been taught in Sweden, don't talk about race. Don't, even though you have another color, it's like, oh, we're all the same. But still we have so much racism in Sweden. So that is something I'm still processing. That what does it mean to be indigenous? And it feels like this puzzle of who I am is like ongoing forever. And what is the next news for me? It feels like it's always something. So that is my comment about that.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so Lisa, we're going to go back to the beginning of our conversation. You and Maria connect. You're an activist. You've got published Palimpsest, which is your amazing story, and you're this brilliant artist. And you hear Maria's story, and you're like,
yeah. So after we met, that meeting, we were bringing up the idea about how can we preserve witness accounts and stories to make people listen to us, because we're sharing them among each other, but we need to make other people listen. So we were talking back and forth about what we could do, and we were talking about like exhibitions and collecting stories and publishing an anthology or something. But I was a bit cynical about that, I remember, because I said that the only people who are going to read an anthology with adoptee voices are adoptees and people who are already in the know. And then during our conversations, that's when I realized how the incredible work that Maria had done and was still doing, that she had traveled many times to, I talk about you in third person now, even though you're sitting here in front of me. Yeah, all the work and because you were the only one of the few who speak Spanish as well. You had access to information in a different way. And I just started admiring everything you were doing and suggested that would it be okay if I write a book about you, if I make a comic about you, but by writing about you, I can also include other people's stories. Because I thought that I noticed with Palimpsest that people were actually listening and not just people who were already involved in the issue. So I thought that could be a good way to get the story out. But then also I'm a big admirer, of course, of activist work. And I feel that a lot of the reporting that was done through the media was focused solely on these sensational bits and about reunions. And they had their own agendas that didn't really fit what we wanted to communicate. And you were like, oh, so you're going to write about me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I said, I'm going to do it great. It's going to be great. And then I also want to add that we shouldn't go in too much on this because we have very limited time. But you also, of course, have a younger brother who was also adopted and also stolen from another family. So I thought it was insane that the two stolen people ended up in the same adoptive family. And since then, we've had even crazier things. But anyway, so I thought it could be quite interesting to put you next to each other in the book. So I talked to your brother as well. So his story is also a big part of the book that I made in the end.
So like you said, it's like about me, yes, about my brother, yes. But what is so incredibly important is that you also tell the story about the mothers. So you tell about families where the children disappeared. And it's so important because both for Korea and Chile, our first parents are so far away, so people can't, feel what they feel or understand what has happened, what the crimes that were, committed against them. And a big part of that, we work together with representatives of Hijos y Madres de Silencio, or Mothers and Children of Silence in Chile. And I also wanted to comment on that one of the people that are working in Chile with this group is a journalist that helped me find my mom more than 20 years ago. So we have really reconnected from 2017, and she and other people, of course, also from the organization, they have been very important for us to be able to do this. Yeah.
So I mean, we started working by talking a lot, and I started structuring the story. And quite early on, I asked, like, do you think that we can talk to some of the parents in Chile, particularly your brother's mother, because she had been talking a little bit. She was quite open about what happened to her, unlike your mother, for instance. So we didn't want to intrude on her. So we asked her, and then that led to that we could talk to other mothers as well. So it was really incredible to be able to include their stories with their words, because I just need to add that there has been some interviews with mothers, or they've been included in some media reporting, but it's very skewed, and a lot of it is focused on how grateful they are to the adopted parents. And that is not the story at all, but that's how these Swedish or other international journalists have skewed the stories, like focusing on the poverty and almost making it a bit of almost like fetishized poverty, like it so often is. And this kind of white savior perspective, that they are so grateful that their child got to grow up healthily and being cared for by these beautiful adopted parents. So it was really interesting to be able to talk to the mothers, because they are not grateful at all. They are angry, and they are grieving, and they are traumatized, and they want their children back. They want what was lost back, of course, and they want justice. And I was lucky enough to get a grant to go to Chile, but unfortunately, COVID happened. So in the end, we had to do it online.
But still, so I wanted to add that, so what is so important in all of this is that Lisa also speaks Spanish. So to be able to talk to the mothers and the other people we talk to in Spanish, that has been like such a advantage, because when you follow other media or other, there's always people that have to, what do you say?
They use an interpreter.
Yeah, and you can hear that so much is missing, from, what the mothers or the families are saying. So I think this was so incredibly great, like what we were able to do because of language. And so I also want to like really underline that. So like language, and to let the mothers tell their stories. That is.
Yeah. And I asked them before we started the interviews, like, what is it that you want to convey with the space that you get here? Like, what do you want me to communicate? So I told them, of course, what the structure of the story was, and that, it's focusing on Maria and her brother, but what is it that you think is important to tell? What do you want now when you can choose? Because I'm not going to change anything to fit the book, so to speak. So they're almost like little portraits that are put in the story, and then they pop up. But they are about stolen children. So we chose mothers who had lost their children through criminal activities. But that was really great. And to move forward a bit, because I could talk about this forever, but it was published in Swedish in 2022. And then earlier this year in January, I think, it came out finally in Spanish. And that was what we had worked for the entire time, that it would be published in Spanish. So when that happened, we decided to take the book, bring it back to Chile, to the mothers, and where it all started. And it coincided with a big Congress as well, organized by Hijos y Madres del Silencio. So we got invited to talk about the book there. But then when we mentioned to people that, we're coming to Chile, we're bringing the book, other people jumped on the bandwagon, and I was invited to 4 other events as well. And 4 of those you were also included, because we wanted to do a little book tour, share it between us. So I talked about the making of the book and how I worked on it, but we also thought it was really important that you got to tell your story. And it was relevant, of course, because that's the story that I tell in the book. So it was a really nice collaboration, I think. And it was so beautiful to be in Chile and to meet the mothers face to face. And Unfortunately, we had a mishap with the actual book coming on time to Chile, but we were still there in the flesh, and I could say thank you to them in person.
Yeah, so the first event we did in Chile, the first day we arrived in southern Chile, two of the moms were in the audience, and we didn't know that.
No.
So it was so beautiful. And yeah, one of the mothers, it's my adopted brother's mom. She was there, sitting and holding my hand while we were waiting to talk. And then the other mom, she was there with her granddaughter. And yeah, you wrote about her in the book, but we found, so her son is a friend of mine, and by a coincidence, we found her back in 2019 and knocked on her door and, talked about her son, and they got connected afterwards. So Lisa tells about that in the book, but she was there. And so I helped to interpret like the first meeting between her and her son online, and the granddaughter was with her then, and it was so beautiful to meet them again. But it's also a struggle, because one thing that Patricia, my adopted brother's mom, what she said is like, we are so alone in this. Like we really need support. We really need, help with everything because what we have noticed for myself also, but you open a big trauma, when you find, if you're lucky enough to find your family or to find your child, you open this big trauma, and it's impossible to explain to someone like what you're going through, and even to understand it yourself. Because I have been talking about my story now, but what I have done, I haven't processed like what happened to me for years and years. What I have done is like I have been traveling to Chile to talk to politicians. I've been in Sweden, like we have been organizing, an organization. I've been doing so much work. So to process that you're a victim of a crime, that I can't understand it until today, that I was kidnapped as a baby, because it's so insane. And also I didn't know about it. Like I really think I knew, but I didn't know it the way a mom experiencing being separated from your baby or from your, child. So actually to hear the mothers talk about this, it is very important. And so I think, again, the story that you tell their stories, Lisa, and that people listen to them, I think that it's so important. And unfortunately, yeah, they are not all here. Like they're already like dying. So, but some are here, and yeah, important.
In Chile, are they believed?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
But the problem is, so now, for years and years, they weren't, but now they are in another way. I think a lot have changed. And for me, for the first time, this time in Chile, because I've been back and forward many times, but this time was the first time I felt that also the indigenous community, like the Mapuche community, that they also had realized that they have lost a generation. Like so many children has been stolen. And that wasn't the case like 5 years ago. So we have been working on telling and showing up like I am one of the babies that disappeared. So that is like kind of have been my work, to just show like we are here. And that was very nice to feel like the indigenous community have understood or have seen us or heard us, and also want to include us. So I think that is very important, like little by little, but still it's so slow, everything. So, yeah.
So I think most people are going to be irritated when I say this, but Excavated Earth is in Swedish and it got translated into Spanish. Hooray. It's not translated into English yet, and I'm assuming most of my listeners are English speakers. So if you're a publisher and you want to get this in English, we have a lineup of customers. When we did book club with Lisa, people were very irritated they couldn't read her next book. So there's a great demand for it over here. So if you know of someone who can translate this into English and get it published in English, that would be amazing. Can you guys talk about your recommendations now? Because it's connected to this story. And Maria, you mentioned one of the organizations already that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, because in Chile, like this scandal with stolen children, it already appeared back in 2014. So they knew about stolen children within the country back then. So several organizations or networks, they started back then in 2014. And for us, for me personally, like Hijos de Madres de Silencio, they are doing such a great job with mothers. And like they are a community today. They meet up every week and they support each other. And like Lisa said, they do those big events like yearly where they invite everyone from the police that is investigating this and people from abroad, like author Lisa, and like they do those big and important things, both in the daily life of the mothers and the families, but also the bigger events. So I really, and what they do is that you can contact them through email, or we're going to share that information. So this is just one organization, but I feel for them and they are very dear to me because they are doing such a big, huge work. And so what they do, they help. If you're an adoptee, you need to have someone around you that can help you with Spanish because they are mostly Spanish speaking. But you can search. If you're looking for your family, you can contact them and they can help you, guide you how you search your family. Same thing, if there is a mom in Chile looking for the child, they also inform. They are on Instagram and on Facebook. So they publish those squares. I think they call cuadros de búsqueda. So search pictures, posters where you have information about the mom or vice versa and so they do that and they work with the investigation in Chile, that is the people that are investigating the crimes. And so that is a big, you can look for them, but it has a very long name.
And also, I just want to add that they do this for free. So it's a non-profit, voluntary based and completely free for adoptees and mothers to use because they don't want to make money because they feel that people have already made money out of us. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good note. We'll make sure to link to them in the show notes. And as I did, I went and you can click translate on the website if you're in Google Chrome. And I looked through the pictures you were talking about on Facebook, Maria, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's really heart-wrenching. So good for them for doing that.
Yeah, and one important thing is if you are an adoptee and you feel oh, I don't really understand my story or I have questions, you can always contact the investigation in Chile, the crime investigation. And I have noticed that people in the US, they are a little bit careful about that because they ask you for information what was your name in your Chilean passport and what do you do for a living today, so they have this form. So the police want you to fill out a form because they are very traditional and old-fashioned in Chile. So they have this form, and we're also going to link. So in Sweden, the authorities, they have published the form. You can download it, fill out your information, and email it to the police in Chile. So they also have a big database of mothers or family that are searching for their children. So they do not only investigate the crimes, but they also have this big bank of people searching. And I also want to mention that you can always do a DNA, those big American companies, you can do those DNA tests. But also, if you're part of the investigation, they want you to do this governmental, like they have other DNA tests they want you to do. So I know, for example, they started with this after they started to investigate my case. Today, they say they want me to do the DNA test and my mom in Chile, just to make sure. I have done one already, the commercial one, but for the crime investigation, they do it another one. So you have to go to the consulate where you live to do the tests.
To make sure you weren't switched around or something.
Yeah, and also I guess for the legal, terms. So that is something. So we can also share where you can download that documents to fill out.
Okay, so if you're a Chilean adoptee, or if you know someone that was adopted from Chile, like you might not even know that this has all transpired. So we want to know the truth, right? Even if it's difficult. I hope that people engage with this. Thank you.
Yeah. And also, like, for the future, we are really trying to, like, both Hijos de Madres de Silencio as an organization and different groups of adoptees in different countries, we are trying to get, like in Korea, like a recognition, like this happened, and we want them to also actually start this reparation. But what we want for the future, because maybe you as an adopted person, maybe you don't want to know because it's scary to learn the truth. But we also have the next generation. We also have our children. So sometimes the children are the ones that are searching for the truth. So if we have this DNA bank, as in Argentina, for example, if we have that, then we will make sure that those crimes, that what happened to us, or, that the future generation, that they will have a place to go to learn the truth. So it's very important with like a governmental DNA database and not only those, commercial ones. So yeah, it's a lot to work for. And, I know this will take years and years. And I was connected to an adopted person from Chile in the US he's building up this, what do you call it, like this group of lawyers and people working to fight for justice. And they are making this case about suing the Chilean government, or the state of Chile, because they didn't look out for us as babies. So you have many different, like I said, groups and organization and what we work for. But yeah, there's a lot out there.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, I'm just going to do a quick aside with Lisa, because I know you have been working with the Korean Truth and Reconciliation Committee. And also, very exciting, congratulations, you just reclaimed your Korean citizenship. I know you've been living there for a little while. Can you talk about those things? Because there's some big things that have happened. And as we're recording this, like it's going to come out, in a month or so. But just as things are today, if you have comments on that, and why did you decide to reclaim your citizenship?
If we start with the citizenship, I lived in New Zealand when I applied for it. And my family and I had just been in Korea then, and I had been talking in the National Assembly, the Korean Parliament, about what happened to me. I had been involved in a big exhibition with Adoptees Only, and it had transformed me in a way. And my kids fell in love with Korea completely and started this campaign about us moving there. So I thought that this could be a good time to try and see if I can restore my citizenship. So I started the process in New Zealand, and they said that, yeah, it could take half a year or a bit longer than that. And it was an insane process because I had to explain to them, because they had no knowledge about adoption, really, that a lot of my documents that you want to see are actually falsified. So you can't really trust what's in it, but hopefully we can work this out anyway. And then they told me that they recommended me not to move to Korea until this had been finalized. But my kids were pushing and saying, we need to move to Korea now. So in the end, we decided to leave New Zealand and move to Korea before I got my citizenship. And it was lucky because I was granted it 2 years after the application. So it took a long time. And yeah, I did it partly because I thought that it would make things easier with the move. But yeah, we moved before it was finalized. But also that symbolically and emotionally, it felt like an important step because activists had fought for adoptees to be able to do this because Korea doesn't actually allow double or dual citizenship. Sweden does, but not Korea. So they have an exception for adoptees only.
Oh.
Yeah. But the thing is, which is a little bit different, because my kids have dual citizenship too, but not Korean. They Swedish and British, which means that they are my kids. They have 2 citizenships, but they are one person. But me, I'm restoring my citizenship. So I'm actually becoming Jong Ullim again. So now I'm both Lisa Ullim Sjöblom, a Swede, and Jong Ullim, a Korean. So I have 2 identities, which is insane. And it's probably going to cause some sort of administrative chaos. But yeah, we'll see about that. But I've been asking around with other adoptees who had restored their citizenship. And yeah, it is a bit of a mess, but it's also working. So yeah.
But 2 identities, that's just like, that's really reclaiming your adoptee identity because we're all like split in some way, I'm sure, inside.
Yeah, it feels very, I don't know, telling. But the beautiful thing is that I got to have a ceremony with other people too who got their citizenship. And I bought a beautiful handbook and I got a big, nice Korean flag to wave around. And yeah, it all felt very special. But now I'm in this, chaos with everything I need to do. I need to change a lot of things here. Yeah, so a lot of paperwork to fill out, which I absolutely hate. So I'm not looking forward to that, but
What?
it still feels incredible.
I thought you were raised in Sweden. I was told you all love paperwork. No? Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I'm the exception.
You're the exception. Yeah, well, Do you have comments on the findings of the commission, any of the recent media reports on that?
Oh, yeah, I am going to try and keep this short as well. So I just wanted to mention first that I was personally involved in making sure that 21 Swedish cases were submitted to the commission in 22. And there's another Swedish case too. But me and my network, the Swedish Korean Adoptees Network, we are representing 21 of these. And it's been quite a process and a long time just waiting for things to happen. And now, as you might know, there's been a bit of a political chaos in Korea because of the impeachment of the sitting president and the impeachment of the president that replaced him. So we're going to have an election in June. So I get to vote very soon, which is also incredible. So the current TSC, which is, we can just loosely call it TSC 2 because it was relaunched in 21, I think. It could be 2020. I could be wrong. Started in 2005 and then ended in 2010 and then relaunched again. So 311 cases out of 367 submitted in total remain to be investigated. So we were very worried because the final report was going to come in May. We were very worried about what they were going to do with the remaining cases. So a lot of the media now is saying that they're closing, but it's rather that they are putting it on hold. So our cases, the 311 remaining, is said that they are unresolved, not closed. They're unresolved until further notice. So what we're hoping for and what we think will happen is that the TSC 3 will open with a new government and our cases will continue to be investigated. And we are also hoping and working for that they will be able to, that other adoptees will be able to submit their cases now. So that the 367 cases will be joined by new cases. Because a lot of people have asked, can we submit our case too? Can we submit? And it's been closed for new cases. So hopefully this will actually lead to something better, a new fresh government, and more room to work with our cases, the ones that already have been submitted, but also the acceptance of new cases.
Amazing. Thank you for that information. And if we ever hear that there's opening for more cases or things, like we're following along with those news, and we'll let you know, and we'll keep people up to date on that. Thank you so much, Maria and Lisa. What an honor to hear your story, Maria. And I love this friendship you've built. What I want to recommend folks check out is you guys have a podcast together, and I hope you start recording more episodes. I know podcasting is a lot of work, but you're a delight together. I love hearing your voices. It's called Lifting the Adoption Fog. And listening to it, I was like, oh man, these are my kind of girls, because you, sorry to call you girls, women, because you're so passionate about adoptees. You're activists, organizers, like you're getting stuff done. Like people will love hearing you talk about adoptee issues. And so I hope folks go and check that out. Where can we connect with you online and follow and hopefully hear news that we're going to see an English copy of Excavating Earth? Why can I have such a trouble saying that? Excavating Earth. What is it in Swedish?
Den uppgrävda jorden. Which is even more tricky to say. Den uppgrävda jorden.
Okay, and then in Spanish?
Tierra excavada.
Okay.
Which is the literal translation. So that's beautiful that they kept it. Yeah.
All right. Amazing. Okay, so Maria, where can we connect with you and follow online?
Yeah, so I have like an Instagram account and connected to a Facebook account. I own my story, Maria Diemar, I think it said. I hope you link it.
I will link it. And yes, that's what it's called.
It's such a long name. Yeah. And Lisa and I, we have the podcast. We have the Instagram for that too. We record more frequently in Swedish. And that is Den talande tystnaden. But yeah, like I said, we have the Lifting the Adoption Fog. So yeah,
we can link to your Swedish podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's a bit more active.
And I'm sure we have some Swedish listeners.
Yeah, and you can also find me on Instagram on Jongolim. And it's good if you share the link, because no one knows how to spell that.
One of these days I'll get it right when I pronounce it. What a delight. Thank you so much, you both. Thank you for your work for adoptees, truly. And I am so glad that you're both in this world working. We're all working alongside each other, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us and giving us
thank
this
you.
space.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, sometimes people ask me, like, why I keep podcasting. Oh, you just talk about the same things. Adoptees, like, we should just get over it by now. When you hear a story like this, okay, where at a minimum 20,000 babies were kidnapped and stolen and sold to other countries, like, how can you not become radicalized in some way? Literally, how? And one thing, we didn't get into it in this interview because, two people, there's so many things I want to get into. The story is fascinating. I wanted to ask them like so many more questions, but like we already went over time. Like I'm sure you get it, but we didn't get into this except for after I was saying to them how Maria in this interview says the skin color shading, right, determines whether or not they could possibly find places for these children, and the racism of it all. I reminded them, I was like, well, the United States, the babies that are available for international adoption from the United States are almost all Black babies. I mean, if you think these things still aren't happening today, like, you're just not paying attention. like this isn't just like some old story of, oh, this happened back in the day. Like, these things are still happening in current day countries. Like now, this is happening all over. I know it's happening in the United States. Perhaps not children being literally kidnapped, but might as well be with the amount of coercion that's happening from adoption agencies. And that's my opinion. Anyway, I hope you follow along with Lisa and Maria. There's so many amazing adoptee activists like bringing these stories to light. Like we can't forget this history because we're repeating it and we just can't be doing that. Like we can't be stealing babies from women just because they're poor. Like babies are not a commodity, right? Like I'm laughing because it's so egregious and just, there's no words for it. It's shocking. It's horrifying. And if you look at the practices of things that are happening today, we're just calling it something different. And we're still stealing babies from poor mothers who don't have supports, you know? Oh my goodness. Anyway, I appreciate you listening. I know some of these things are so hard to listen to. It's very hard. And to think of the impacts it has had on those, say, 20,000 plus adoptees from Chile, and many of them likely don't even know that they were stolen. And like you and me perhaps have this idea like Maria did, like your mom gave you away. When in truth, in Maria's experience, she was forcibly taken. So things to think about. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to Adoptee Voices. If you want Adoptees On to continue to exist in this world, please consider joining us on Patreon. It's adopteeson.com/community. And we do our best to help support you and also the show to support more adoptees around the world. We would love to have your support over there. Thanks for listening. Let's talk again soon.